Crossed swords on the neo-geo. This is an interesting beast because it combines two things I love with a passion: the neo-geo and RPGs. And it creates a really interesting concept that's pretty fun to play. At least for a while. So the plot to Crossed Swords is kind of thrown out the window immediately, but the short version is there's a princess that's been captured, go rescue her, because some evil guy really wanted a princess, only to release her anyway because I don't know why the villain released the princess. I guess he just thought you were so cool. I don't know, the plot to this game does seem kind of rather inconsequential. However, what isn't so much is the gameplay. And the gameplay to Crossed Swords is genuinely fascinating. A first look glance at this might make you think that this is almost like a medieval version of Punchout, with the camera behind your character attacking your opponents head on, but that's just a visual thing, honestly. It's not so much a Punch-Out style game as it is a hack and slash style game, just with the camera behind your character. In fact, the only thing about Punch-Out you can really equate to this, aside from the camera, is the fact that you actively have to read your opponent's movements in order to succeed. And that actually makes for a pretty deep game. Okay, so the concept to this game is simple. The screen scrolls through an environment as you fight off various monsters. Once you defeat all the monsters on screen, you move on to the next area. Rinse and repeat until you beat the chapter, and then continue on until you beat the game. So let's start by taking a look at the individual fights. Basically, once you square off with an opponent, the game plays almost entirely defensive. Early on you can kind of play offensively, but very quickly you sort of stop being able to do that. The key mechanics of this game are blocking with your shield. You can hold it in two positions, either up to block an attack from above, or down to block an attack at your midsection. And this is the key to success in this game, because once you block an opponent's attack, you can counterattack, and that's how you do damage to your opponents in this game. So while it's a very simple defensive system, it's very important if you are to actually take the offensive. Now, speaking of offensive, well, that's where this game gets a little bit more deep. Similarly to blocking up and down, you can attack horizontally or vertically, attacking their head or their chest, and depending on how they act, they can actually block this as well. However, what's interesting is there's a couple more slashes than that. You have a thrust, which seems to act more or less just as a standard chest blow, so I'm not sure why that's all that special, but your character also has a couple special abilities associated with them. First and foremost, you have magic. Now, magic is variable by quite a fair bit. There's several different weapons in the game that all present you with different magics, and they can be from a standard fireball to covering the entire screen with fire, giving you a shield that not only protects you but like triples your attack output, to, if you play your cards right and find this hidden weapon, a sword that turns your opponents into scarecrows and makes them ridiculously weak. That weapon's a keeper. So magic has varying uses and abilities, but they're always very, very useful. The problem with magic, however, is it is a manageable, quantifiable resource. You only have so many magic charges before you run out, and while you'll gain more if you die or you happen to pick up a magic pickup along the way, you're really limited to how much you can really use this. So resource management is very important to your success in this game. But magic's not your only special trick. You also have a couple of other special abilities, starting with sword beams. Yeah, you can just fire lasers out of your sword. I never found too many situations where this was actually useful, so I never really used it too much. You can also create sort of an instantaneous shield to interrupt opponents, and this ability is vital near the end, because enemies kinda get a little bit ridiculous. But I think the most important ability is sort of your crazy whirlwind slash, where you basically just start hacking crazily at your opponent and basically decimate them instantaneously. And the nice thing is, this works against bosses and stuff too. Now the drawback to these special abilities is, like any good beat 'em up, it drains your health. But if you're playing this version, you've basically got unlimited quarters, so it's not that big a deal. What is a bigger problem with this game, and it actually leads to a greater problem with this game overall, is that, you know that super awesome move that's like the beat the game button with that whirlwind slash? Well, yeah, later on in the game, every enemy can block it perfectly. And I don't just mean they sometimes block it, they make it impossible to actually land with that ability. And that is the ability you want to use in emergencies to, you know, get out of really bad situations or enemies that you can't just match very well up with because maybe you can't pick up their tells all that well. And, yeah, yeah, just every enemy can suddenly block it, and you have no way to really respond to that. And this is kind of an indicator of really what I don't like about this game. Because I love this game in concept, and like the first 15 minutes of this game are absolutely great. But then the mood sort of shifts, and this game just gets absurdly difficult really fast. See, not only does every enemy suddenly have the ability to just block every single slash of your super emergency only ability, well, now suddenly they've got significantly more health, and oh yeah, that's right, they suddenly all start pulling out these ridiculous combos. I think I ran into one enemy that had like a 12 hit combo, and combos in this game are a little bit strange, because you do have that ability that kind of breaks combos, and you can kind of block in between swings in combos, but the timing for it is so absurdly small that it's almost not worth trying, because it happens once, maybe every 20 times you'll ever actually succeed in blocking something in a combo. So basically when you run into an enemy that starts their first hit in your combo, you can basically just expect about half your health bar to be gone by the end of it. Good luck after that, really. I mean, the nice thing is there's only about 6 different types of enemies, so when you run into enemies like that, at least by that part you should be kind of expecting some things from it. You should be able to sort of tell what their specific swings mean, but it still really, really sucks. Now, to help you fight these stronger enemies, again, you get different weapons, and these different weapons have a passive damage boost to them. So it's important to stock up on new weapons as you go. As well, there's a leveling system. As you defeat more enemies and complete various rooms in the game, you get experience that goes to your level. Once you level, you get more health. I'm pretty sure that's the only difference between levels, honestly. But the thing that really sucks about it is if you want to actually get to the final character level for this game, you basically have to spam magic at various points. Like, you'll run into rooms that just have like these instantaneously spawning enemies that will attack you and then disappear. Yeah, if you don't kill every single one of those, you can't get to the final level of your character. Which means when you finally get to the final boss, assuming you've plowed enough quarters into this machine at this point to get there, you're going in suboptimally. And there's not really a lot you can do other than just spam magic. And if you're spamming magic, well, you're probably going to have to die in between just to recover your magic. This game really does like to take that whole sort of arcade mentality of, okay, we need to get as many quarters as quickly as possible, let's abuse our players to no end. And that's the biggest issue I have with this game in general, is it just gets stupidly difficult, especially near the end. The final boss has so much health, he can block your special abilities, and the only thing that does reasonable amounts of damage to him, and I use reasonable in quotes because it really doesn't do all that much, is magic. And while the final boss itself kind of has a somewhat predictable pattern, I sat there and basically just smashed him into the ground, and that fight still took forever. And in addition, this is not a short game. This is a game that really does like to stretch out the experience as much as possible. I think my first playthrough through this game took about an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours. And after like the first 20 minutes, it just got really old because, you know, I was having fun when it started, but then enemies started to get like absurd blocking and absurd attacking abilities, and it just got to the point where it's like, okay, I've seen this enemy so many times, why am I having so much trouble with it when I understand exactly how to fight it? Oh wait, that's just because they made it arbitrarily stupid. Awesome. However, it's not all bad. Like I said, the actual combat, reading your opponents, as well as checking out the different magics and stuff, it's all very, very cool. And another great feature to this game, there's multiple paths through every environment. Now, as awesome as that does sound, unfortunately, like a lot of the later game, it's really not any benefit to this game. See, while there's like 4 different moments where you can pick a route, 3 of those moments only dictate you fighting really weak enemies compared to enemies that you're used to fighting. I'm not sure if there's actually any experience difference between these routes, but that's it. There is one moment, however, where you do unlock a special weapon. That is the sword that gives you the ability to turn enemies into scarecrows. That's awesome. That is an awesome route that is totally worth exploring. But otherwise, it's just completely meaningless, which is a shame because that is something that has a lot of potential. Lots of beat-em-ups have multiple paths in it. I've seen, like, the Dungeons and Dragons games had great alternate paths for how to go through this beat-em-up world. And yet here, it's done to no great effect, which is unfortunately more or less an allegory for what this game is. It's a game that has lots of great ideas, lots of potential, and starts out brilliantly fun, and then just kind of drags on and feels like a waste of time for everyone involved. Now, the overall presentation to Cross Swords is amazing. I mean, first and foremost, it's a neo-geo game, but There are awesome cutscenes in here that make this game look really cinematic. The environments, both in the cutscenes and in the actual world, are beautiful. The character models, great. The enemies are brilliant. I really love these knights that just look like ninjas. Seriously, I have got to find the sprites for these guys because they just look so cool. I love these guys. Even just the look at the map as you transition between worlds and chapters, while it's giving you a small bit of exposition, is really beautifully done. There is nothing about this game you can really complain about presentation-wise. And audio-wise, it's decent enough. I honestly don't remember too much about the soundtrack itself, but while I was playing I thought it was certainly serviceable. I don't think it does anywhere near as much justice as the visual presentation to this game, but the audio is no slouch. Now, if you want a copy of Crossed Swords on the Neo-Geo, cheapest one I'm seeing on eBay right now, $300. Now, would I recommend Crossed Swords? Not for that price, no. Even for the typical $15 Neo-Geo ACA digital value, I think is just a little too much. And it's a shame because Crossed Swords is a really brilliant game, and it's one of the few real examples of a Neo-Geo RPG. I mean, it was an arcade cabinet. They really didn't make RPGs all that much. And it's a shame because this game has so many cool ideas and interesting concepts going for it, a beautiful presentation, and genuinely really fun gameplay for at least the first couple chapters. Unfortunately, this game just squanders its brilliant ideas by the end of it, drags its heels for way longer than it has any right to. And worst of all is it really does just completely embrace the arcade mentality of abusing its players to get the most profit, to the point where it almost loses sight of being fun in the first place. And it's a shame because, you know, that first 15-20 minutes is an absolute freaking blast. If you run into a Neo-Geo machine that has Crossed Swords in it, yeah, absolutely, go in, put a couple quarters in, go experience those first few chapters because it is an absolute freaking blast to play. But you know, after the first few chapters, you die? You know, I would call it right there because honestly, this game is best enjoyed in small bursts. And trying to experience the full adventure is really just going to drag down the whole experience. Because the greater overall experience really does drag down the amazing concepts and the awesome start this game has. It's so focused on that arcade mentality that it loses sight of what it's trying to be. And it's a damn shame. Apparently there is a sequel to this that, as far as I can tell, only existed on the consoleized Neo Geo CD, and maybe that one actually plays a little bit better because it's designed specifically for consoles instead of the arcade. I don't know. But I gotta say, I'm totally interested in checking it out, you know, if I ever get a Neo Geo CD. Again, those are pretty expensive as well, but, you know, Crossed Swords is a series of interesting ideas and interesting concepts that work to a point, but it's stretched so long and far, and it's tempered so stupidly difficult by the end. So you know what? If you can go experience Crossed Swords, I recommend it if you play it on the super cheap for a life or two. But you know, after that first couple chapters, I'd suggest hanging your swords up.